So here's a spruce that I collected from the Spruce Collect, and it kind of has this forward lean, and I've done a trunk chop earlier in the year, so that was early this spring, and I wired it up, and then the wire started to bite in, so I took it all off, and everything sort of sprung up. It's extremely bendy, but also vigorous with growth, so it came right out of its wire. And I think I had this sort of wrapped around, so I have to kind of figure out what I'm gonna do with it. I want to clean up the dirt, make it nice there, and then sort of decide on branches. I have a few, this transition is a bit strange because there's a branch there and a top there, and so it's kind of knobby there, and then the line, if I'm thinking of the line kind of coming up, it then kind of shoots this way, so it's a strange transition that over time that might smooth out, and I can get a nicer line, and then maybe like this maybe needs to all just come off because it's like above where the line is, so that's this whole branch. But I've wired the branch up, so I have everything kind of wired, so I am gonna have to make some sort of structural choices here too. You got 1, 2, 3, and then 4. It's gonna create a whirl there. Same here, I have to start picking branches, so I have to do that throughout the whole tree, and then I just have to sort of design on some sort of design. How do I want the branches? What kind of feel do I want to sort of give it? And then sort of create some consistency between the branch bends and the way that I want to bend them. I don't want to twist them too much, and I feel like the length is okay for a lot of these because I will be able to kind of cut them back to this interior growth. But I really do want to have it, I think I want to have it coming down a lot. So like heavy snow load on it. The other piece I have to decide is, how do I want this top? I could kind of like bend it down like I have some of them, and then just sort of make an apex like right there, and then bring the tree down, or even here. But what happens is if I crunch all of this down and around, I won't be able to grow the tree any taller in the long-term sort of growth of the tree. So I'm kind of trying to find that balance of like, I want it to look good now, but I also want it to have some future. I don't want to just kind of make an instant bonsai and then trying to keep it in that form, which will just slowly grow out of it. I'll just keep trying to keep it in. So I am thinking of kind of doing something in between where I keep this upper branch and maybe make this the new apex, and so to just turn this down and have that as a branch that I eventually will cut off because it'll be too thick, and use sort of other branches as the growth, and maybe have a little bit of a spiral, so that maybe in the future the tree can be yay high, 5 10 years, much thicker trunk, and have it sort of a decent sized tree versus keeping it here, which would sort of fit the trunk thickness, I think, but it would just have not a lot of future. So that's kind of my thought process, and then I'll take you through it a bit as I do some of the work. But first I want to clean up down here. So I really like this branch. I'm gonna try to keep this more, not so directional. I think my best start is just here. And I was kind of thinking of that concept of a tree sort of hugging you and inviting you in, and so the shoulder, it's not here, right? It's open and back, almost off the shoulders, which makes me want to open this up. I do have a sort of a structural flaw here in that there's 3 branches coming out of this section here, and same up here, and I've actually wired them. So I think I am gonna have to take them off, but so I don't want too much movement in these. I do want them coming down. So yeah, that's not enough wire on there. Not heavy enough wire. Bring this down. Bring that back over there. I'm going to create these pads flat. This is going to give me some depth back here. This and sitting there. I don't really want these branches twisted too much, but I do want them shortened and compact, and this is one way for me to get them a little more compact. Now this one I'm not going to sit in here. Kind of like that. You know, this I need to flatten out. It's going to be quite cluttered. I kind of want this here. Some foreground above. It's a bit. So I kind of designed it a little bit like this, and I really focused on that line coming up because it was so harsh. You can see even as you go in there, there's still some knobs I have to take off and kind of make, it just looks like a little bit of a knob. There's a bit dense, but, and then even as I move over here, the line kind of becomes nicer almost. But what happens is this root starts to really stick out, and it just cuts across the trunk back. If I zoom in, you can see. One of the things I'm going to do is fill this in. I just haven't got to it yet. And so I originally wanted the front sort of more here. But what happens is the chunk there comes out where I bent it back down and around, which was the original apex. Right there coming up. And I've sort of bent it back. And it's huge. And I think eventually I might be able to take that off and have some other growth fill in that section. But for now I'm going to leave it. It adds that little bit of depth, but I've almost hidden it by just setting it straight back and straight. But you can see that little curve as you get closer. And it looks like I've curved it right down. So we'll see, I'll have to fix that spot. But yeah, I'm actually really liking the way it's turned out. I was kind of trying to find that balance point, because I could have used that top and just taken it off right there and, just, what do you call it, twisted it around and pushed it to right there, right there, and had like a nice little apex on top. But the future of the tree, what could it possibly be at that point? That, even if a branch comes out, then you have this big twist in the branch. And so I was trying to find that balance. I'm thinking, okay, like, what can I do in 3 years? I think that's about as far as I can kind of conceptualize. But even let's say 5 years, and the trunk thickens out, and then, I have the top. I mean, the top can even go a little bit higher, into some sort of more natural form. That's my kind of thought, and, there's some other weird things, like you see this straight line. That's not very good. You want more of, more of the triangle. Some outs and ins, which I don't have that much. I have a little bit of it. It's really out, in, flat there. Here it kind of comes up, straight up, and there. So, in there might be nice if I had that sort of taken off, filled the space with some of those branches. But what I'm thinking of is actually just growing them out longer, and denser. As I grow them and cut them back and get them into a more dense form, I can start to get that shape. I've really bent the branches down a lot. So you can see they come right down. And I tried to be fairly consistent with that, and then slowly let them come up as they come up. There's a few odd ones I didn't wire in there at this phase, and part of it is I just need to get it to grow strong. So I have a lot of branches. I mean, that's the other piece is, I like this branch here. It comes down sort of as my primary branch. But what happens is you see this lower one a lot, just because there's nothing covering it there, and the lot's covering that, this one here. So, in the future, that will probably thicken out, and that might be my sort of primary directional branch, and the apex is just, it's essentially right over the top right now, but because the tree is this way, feels like the apex is over to the left a bit. It actually looks like it comes back a bit, but when you see it in person, it feels like it's off to the left a little bit. Well, actually, it's hard to say now when I look at it through the camera. But my goal was to kind of have it all in one direction, but nothing extreme. Like, if I could consider taking off this branch here and this branch, because they're also very thick. So you look at the size of that branch and that branch. So right there and right there, those two branches, they're pretty thick for so high. Everything else is decently in proportion. You get a pretty thick one here, but this is thinner than that, and this is one of my lower branches, and this is my primary branch, and it's pretty much my thickest. I had a huge branch coming out there that I took off because it was, I had the one, two, three, kind of in the same section, but this section, let's see if we can get in there, it's a teeny bit higher. So, and I can kind of cover that. And one of the things I noticed with bar branches is they're particularly bad when they're straight up and straight across, and you get that straight line. If you bend the bar branches down, it doesn't pull the eye in the same way. And since I have so many branches in here, it creates sort of an overall image. You know, but you can see that line there. So yeah, I mean, this is my sort of original front. And I've sort of designed it here. And like I said, mostly to get rid of this section and make that look nicer. But I deal with this, and I don't like that. Now this was chopped here, and there's a dead root there, and a dead root there, but I think there's a lot of roots coming off. So I think eventually I'll come back to this side and just move the branches a little bit more, and hopefully I can, you know, just lop off those sort of dead sections that I haven't yet done. But yeah, I'm actually really liking the way this turned out as per usual. That's how much I took off, so not a lot, but I wanted to kind of be careful with it. I had wired it earlier this year. I took all the wire off because everything was starting to bite in, and a lot of stuff just sprung back at this age. It's so hard with spruce. It's so apically dominant and grows so vigorous at this point, this age, that it just sort of shot back up. So I'm going to be fighting that a lot. Did put a small guy wire on this one. Can't really see it. It's where I had the not strong enough wire on that first branch I was making. So I've guy wired it in, connected it. I mean, right now you can't see a lot of the wire because it's dark, but there's actually quite a lot of wire on it. And you know, like it's the branches don't have uniform tips in the sense that some are kind of coming down. This one I have tilted a bit this way, where a lot of the other ones are flat. It just creates some thickness there and some depth at the base, but maybe a little bit too cluttered. You know, and it's not an ancient form in that way. It's not a Ryan Neal sort of going for ancient with dead wood and a lot sparser branching. So it's that, I don't know what, you know, mid-age tree at this point especially. But, you know, eventually over time, I can kind of, you know, maybe decide to leave some deadwood. I don't think I will, but make it more sparse. Because again, it just gets cluttered in sections, and there's so many branches. But at this point, like I said, I'm just kind of, I took off a certain amount. I'll do a little bit more. I'll see how it responds. The other thing that I really tried to do this time was direct the growth. So some sections, like this one, it's just really long out here, and I chopped back a huge section of it to sort of pull back. And where there's like, you know, like sections like this, I'm gonna have to deal with at some point, right? This is, you know, 3 branches, and the main one is gonna create reverse taper. So I'm really gonna have to, or just a knob, if you want to call it that at this point, not reverse taper, just some knob. So I'll have to take off 2 of those branches, and there's a few other sections like that. I've tried to do it with the bigger ones, but you know, here's another section where it's 1, 2, 3, and the back one's coming up a little higher, but that's going to create a swelling there, and that'll be noticeable. So I'm gonna have to deal with those as it moves into as it evolves. But even so, I'm just a little hesitant to take off too much. I seem to be getting braver and braver as time goes on, but I tried to direct some of the growth. So where I had sections like this, I sort of chose between, you know, 2 of them to keep. And this is not one that I did that with. I want this one to go strong, but the ones that were really strong, so like this back, let's see here, this back, which was the top, was way out here. So I pulled it way back, because I don't need growth into that branch at all. And the last thing I think that I could probably comment on was I really tried to work on some depth. That might be hard to get in the video, but I had a lot of like 2-dimensional trees, because I just worked it from the front, didn't have branches coming down in the back to have depth. So like there you can see there's no depth in here, a teeny bit back there. But I could have tried to make more, I just didn't. Down here I did a little better job, and even when you get lower. You can see there's some back branches way in there to try to get a little bit more depth. Yeah, I think it's looking pretty nice. I mean, it has a kind of what do you call that, like a steep triangle feel. It almost has a bit of that cedar sort of look, even though it's a spruce. Yeah.